Thank you very much.
Here's one thing you need to do before buying anything online. Don't spend another dime on Amazon until you watch this first. Watch this. I can show you how to get the sweetest deals online.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Gurudev, all glories to the Vaishnavi devotees. We thank you all for being here today. Today we are super blessed. We have the presence of His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu, who will be speaking to us from the Nectarian Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhuji has been with us before, and we can't thank him enough for being with us again today. So we're going to be waiting for him briefly, and then he will start speaking. Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Prabhuji. Srimad Madhavananda Prabhu. May you unmute? We see if your audio is working okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, very much, very clear. Thank you so much, and welcome to Hare Krishna Africa Zoom platform, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Can you make me a co-host so I can
Sure.
share?
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I had some health problems. I hope I'll be able to make it through this tonight.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I'm happy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
So are you going to be sharing from your end? You may share from your end. You may handle it the way you want to handle it.
okay, that's great.
Yes. Okay.
So and start.
Hare Krishna.
Shall we go ahead and start?
Yes, please.
So I'll just say a few prayers. Narayanam namaskrityam naramschaiva narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Vedi Ramayane Shaiva Purane Bharate Tatam Madhavande Cha Madhye Cha Hari Sarvatragiyate Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhangum Nandayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shigurum Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Prabhuji, how long should we go for? Say half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours? You tell me.
Prabhu, as far and as long as you want to go, we are here for you. If you want to go for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, yes, we're here for you.
Okay, let's just see how it goes.
Yes.
So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 2, Chapter 6, which I believe is called Purusasukta Confirmed, text number 4. Tadgatam vastu saranam subhagasya chabhajanam swagasya sparsha vayoscha sarvamedhasya chaivahi. Speaking about that universal form of the Lord. His bodily surface is the breeding ground for the active principles of everything and for all kinds of auspicious opportunities. His skin, like the moving air, is a generating center for all kinds of sense of touch and is a place for performing all kinds of sacrifice. So Prabhupada gives a short purport. It's one sentence. The air is a moving agent of all the planets, and as such, a generating centers for promotion to the deserving planets, the sacrifices for his bodily surface, and are naturally the origin of all auspicious opportunities. Okay. So I have a question for everybody here today. Since these devotees are putting me on the spot, and I'm supposed to be the Bhagavatam speaker, and it's very difficult, I would just like an honest answer from everybody here. You can raise your hand, this, or give a little digital raised hand. How many of you really find this particular chapter of the Bhagavatam fascinating? Or how many of you just love this particular chapter of the Bhagavatam? Raise your hand. It's a yes. That's good. We have some honest persons there. I love it. Thank you. Most devotees, I know, if they ask them to speak on this section of the Bhagavatam or the third canto, they time according to the atom. Sometimes the blood drains from their face. They become a little pale. And, oh, Prabhu. But we should contemplate. We should contemplate the meaning of this chapter. Now, some devotees, I've heard, they say that it was Srila Prabhupada who first gave this title to this chapter, this section of the Bhagavatam, chapter 5, the cause of all causes, and chapter 6, Purusa-sukta confirmed. First of all, that's not true. Sridhar Swami, the famous commentator in the Bhagavatam, and his Bhavarta Dipika commentary, which he wrote in Orissa, also says that this chapter, this is the Puranic version of the Purusa-sukta. Srila Jiva Goswami in his Bhagavat Sandarbha also speaks about it. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes some similar comments. it wasn't just Srila Prabhupada. The other Srila Prabhupada's following our acharyas. I'm a little sensitive about that in some ways, because sometimes devotees, sometimes people, they want to find fault with Srila Prabhupada. They say that Prabhupada just originated something, and they find faults with the Bhaktivedanta purport or something, which we're very sensitive. Srila Prabhupada was following very strictly our parampara. So let's look a little bit at this Purusa-sukta, and let's contemplate what's the purpose of this section of the Bhagavatam for devotees. Devotees I know memorize a lot of verses from the Bhagavatam. I don't know anybody who's memorized verses from the 6th chapter, the 2nd canto. How do we see this chapter, this section of the Bhagavatam? What is the relevance of it for us? If the Bhagavatam is, as described in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Prema Moyi Bhagavata Krishna Shriyanga, it's Krishna Shriyanga, it's the body of Krishna, and it's Prema Moyi Bhagavat, it's part of the body of Krishna. So then, what is this Purusa-sukta's position in terms of the Bhagavatam and for Gaudiya Vaishnavas? That's an important question for us. And whenever we speak about something, we should first of all understand our position by which we're approaching it. Just like, I'll give you an example. If you come to India, then you have to have a passport. You have to have a visa to enter the country. And what is that passport? That passport is a declaration, it's a statement of where you belong to, where you come from. And then the visa is something that the government has granted you, which will allow you access to India. So in a similar way, when we want to approach Krishna, previous acharyas, when we want to approach Shastra, we have a passport and we have a visa. And the passport is our Gurudev, the passport is our parampara, the passport is our previous acharyas, which we follow. And by understanding their approach and their perspective on the Bhagavatam, in this particular section of the Bhagavatam, we can enter into it. But even though you may have that passport, without a visa, you also can't enter. And that visa is the chanting of the holy name and the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by which Sri Damodar Goswami describes Jahu Bhagavata Pada Vaishnava Rastani Ekanta Ashraya Kori Chaitanya Charani. That if you want to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, two things are required. You have to get the mercy of a devotee, and you have to get the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what is a necessity, my grandmas used to ask, of getting the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Mahaprabhu is described by Rupa Goswami as Krishna Prema Pradata. He's the giver of Krishna Prema. And that Krishna Prema is required to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. So we don't have that Prema, we're bereft of that, but we're young students in the school of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, and we should understand the perspective of our line for these prayers. So let's look a little at the Purusa-sukta itself. This is, Purusa-sukta is described in the Rig and Samavedas, and it's especially generally cited from the 10th section, 10th canto, you might want to call it, the Rig Veda, chapter 90. So let me put this verse on the board here. And Purusa-sukta, by the way, is a Vedic mantra. The way that it's chanted is not the same as general mantras. You may have heard them reciting Purusa-sukta in the Gurukul and Mayapur. This particular verse, if I can recall how I used to have Purusa-sukta memorized, I used to recite it daily. Tasmat yagyahat sarvahutaha Richaha samani yagyerehe chandangsi jagyere tasmahat jusadasmat ajayata. So this verse describes that from this Purusa-sukta, tasmad yagyat sarvahutaha, from him came all the different yagyas, all the different sarvahuta, all the different sacrifices, richa samani yagyere, the mantras from the Rig and Sama Vedas. Chandangsi, from him came all the chanda, all the different meters and things. Chandangsi tasmat, jusadasmat ajayata, and all the different yaja mantras. So the Purusa-sukta is a classical verse, a classical prayer, which is offered to God. And it's understood by many different persons in many different ways, according to their particular school. And there are some worshippers of the demigods, the devatas in India, who consider that Purusa-sukta is speaking about Lord Shiva or about Ganesh. And there's some impersonalists also who recite Purusa-sukta in a very much different mood than ourselves. Srila Prabhupada, in his chapter notes for the 10th canto, chapter 1, he speaks about the Purusa-sukta because the Purusa-sukta was a prayer that Lord Brahma recited along with the devatas to call for Krishna's appearance. So in his chapter summary for that first chapter, the 10th canto, Prabhupada writes this: when it is said that the demigods offered prayers to the Lord by chanting a Purusa-sukta, this indicates that they pleased the Lord by enunciating prayers of bhakti. So in other words, Purusa-sukta is for bhakti, but it depends on the particular mood of the devotee. In the Chaitanya Bhagavata, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur describes the Lord. He says, Jai Rupa Chinte Dasi, Se Rupa Hoy, that the Lord manifests a corresponding form according to the mood of his devotee. So similarly, different people will see the Purusa-sukta in different ways, just as different people see all of us in different ways. There's who's in some devotees here, Rasa Vilasdas, I don't know everybody, Varaha Acharya Prabhu, Narayani Devi. You're known by different persons in different ways. And Rasa Vilas Prabhu, I don't mind me saying, but maybe your mother, when you were a little baby, she used to call you Boo-Boo. And she used to tickle you and things like that. And maybe to this day, she still calls you Boo-Boo. I don't know. Please forgive me. And maybe your teacher would chastise you and call you something else. Maybe you had some friends in school who called you Bandhu or Bhai, our dear friend. Maybe you have a sweetheart or girlfriend. I hope your wife doesn't mind it. Or maybe you're a brahmachari, I'm sorry, who calls you Snookums or some name like that. You're known by so many different people in so many different ways. That's just relationships. That's just common sense. So also we understand the Bhagavatam in Vedic literatures in different ways. There's a famous verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Lord Shiva says, Aham Vedmi, Shuka Vedi, Vyasa Vedi na Vedi va. Lord Shiva says, I understand Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadev Goswami understands Srimad Bhagavatam. And there's a long story about that in some Sthala Puranas in Orissa. There's a description that Jagannath Puri was originally known as a Kamrakanan, or the place of one mango tree. And it was there, one mango tree, or sometimes they say one mango forest, it was there that Lord Shiva was speaking Bhagavatam to his wife Parvati. And at that time, Radharani's parrot came, because Radha and Krishna had just left this world. And that parrot was very eager to hear Krishna Katha. And Radharani told him, you'll stay behind and later speak Krishna Katha. The qualification for a good speaker is that they like to hear. And so the parrot heard that Bhagavatam is being spoken right now in Bhuvaneshwar by Lord Shiva. So he went there very quickly, but he's a little careful because the Bhagavatam is a Paramahamsa Samhita. It's something for qualified persons. And Lord Shiva, he's known as Asutosh. He's very easily pleased, but he's also known as Rudra. He has a bad temper. And so Shuka, that parrot of Radha, Sri Shukuvacha, entered into that tree, and Lord Shiva didn't see the parrot. Meanwhile, Parvati was listening to the Bhagavatam, and Lord Shiva speaking the first canto, second canto, Purusa-sukta confirmed in that. And somehow Parvati Devi, she fell asleep. Now, before she fell asleep, Parvati, as a good listener, she was being responsive, and she was saying, like this. When she fell asleep, after a little bit, Lord Shiva noticed, my wife's asleep, but the sound, is still coming. So he looked around to see where it was coming from, and he saw this parrot sitting in the tree with a big smile, hearing the Bhagavatam. And Lord Shiva then became angry, picked up his Trishula and started chasing that parrot, who flew then to Bhadrak Ashram, where Srila Vyasadeva was speaking the Bhagavatam to his wife, and his wife was astonished hearing the Bhagavatam. She was listening with an open mouth, and that parrot flew inside the mouth of Sukadeva Goswami, Vyasadeva's wife, entered into her womb, and became known as Sukadeva Goswami. And therefore Lord Shiva says, Aham Vedmi Shukavedi. I understand the Bhagavatam. Sukadeva Goswami, he understands it because he heard from me. Vyasa Vedi na Vedi va. Whether Vyasa understands or not, I can't really say. Bhakti Bhagavatam Grayam na Buddhaya na Chatikaya. To understand the Srimad Bhagavatam, bhakti is required. Na Buddhaya na Chatikaya. Not just by dint of our intelligence, not just by dint even of taking help from commentaries. And there's so many different commentaries on the Bhagavatam that we can take help from. But the Bhagavatam is a person. Krishna Tulya Bhagavat, Vibhu Sarvashwai, Prati Shloki Prati Akshri Nanatakoi. Just as Krishna is Vibhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so also is Srimad Bhagavatam. And just as Krishna is unlimited, so also is Srimad Bhagavatam. So how do we understand this Purusa-sukta? Well, Prabhupada says in the beginning of the 10th canto that this is a prayer given by the demigods. It's a prayer for bhakti. Now, this Purusa-sukta is also mentioned again in the Bhagavatam in chapters 37 and 38 of the, 27 and 37 of the 11th canto, where Krishna is speaking to Uddhava about Archana, about deity worship. And Krishna personally recommends that this Purusa-sukta be recited. And we also see in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, in the Madhya Kanda, chapter 9, there is a description given of the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how they performed some abhishek of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And while they were doing that, they were reciting the Purusa-sukta. So let's look at these verses. This is text number 30 and 31. Advaita Srivasadi Jateka Pradhan Padiya Purusa-sukta Karayena Snan. So these great devotees were the Pradhan Bhaktas, the most important devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Padiya means to recite. Padiya Purusa-sukta Karayena Snan. While they were bathing the Lord, Advaitacharya and Srivas Thakur were reciting the Purusa-sukta. Gaurangera Bhakta Sabha Mahamantra Vit. The devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were very expert. They were mantra-vit, very expert in chanting mantras, and especially the Maha Mantra. And it says, Gaurangera Bhakta Sabha, all of them were expert. Mantra Pari Jala Dhale Hoy Harasita. And as they would recite these mantras, they were pouring this water on the Lord. So the Purusa-sukta is not just a prayer for the Smarta Brahmins. It's not just a prayer for impersonalists or for demigod worshippers who have a strange understanding of the prayer, but it's also for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And Srila Prabhupada, in his purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila chapter 17, text 18, he also speaks about the Purusa-sukta. Let's look at that. he speaks about this pastime, which we just mentioned, which took place in Srivas Anga, the house of Srivas Thakur. Prabhupada says, one day in the house of Srivas Thakur, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat down on the bed of Vishnu, and all the devotees worshipped him with the Vedic mantras of the Purusa-sukta, beginning with Sahasra Sirsa Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat. This Veda stuti should also be introduced, if possible, for installations of deities. While bathing the deity, all the priests and devotees must chant this Purusa-sukta and offer the appropriate paraphernalia for worshiping the deity, such as flowers, fruits, incense, artik paraphernalia. Naivedya means boga, vastra means cloth, and dressings, and ornaments. All the devotees worship Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this way, and the Lord remain in ecstasy for 7 praharas, or 21 hours. So this is an instruction from Srila Prabhupada. Whenever we read something, we should carefully consider it. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says that the function of a student is to reflect whatever knowledge he's gotten and not imprison it like we'd imprison someone in a jail cell, and just have what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta calls a lexicographical understanding. Lexicography is the study of a dictionary. So lexicographical means a dictionary understanding. It says it there in the dictionary, and I understand it in that way. Or to put it in the way, I saw a bumper sticker once in America. Some Christians had it, said, Jesus said it, I believe it, and that settles it. In other words, there's no possibility of thinking about it. But in Srila Prabhupada's earliest lectures in New York City, in 26 2nd Avenue, 1966 and 67, Prabhupada did this. Some of the lectures you can see, Prabhupada telling the devotees, don't accept it just because Swamiji says, just because I say so. You have to also have your doubt. And Prabhupada wrote a letter to his name, Karandar Prabhu, his Prabhupada's main GBC at that time. And Prabhupada told him the function of the Krishna conscious movement is to create independent thinkers. It's a very important principle. In organized religion, in mundane religion, people just blindly follow. But within Krishna consciousness, we all have an individual relationship with Krishna. It's not that we're all going to go and everybody's all going to be the same. We go to the spiritual world and we're all going to have exactly the same t-shirts and shoes, and we're going to be part of the ISKCON team, and you'll be able to see because of our colors or whatever that we have, we're all going to be different. And different devotees will have different relationships and different services with Krishna. So that's a very important principle. It's a difficult principle for new devotees, just as a small baby, a small child. You want the child to grow up and be a thinker, but when the 2-year-old baby is crawling around and putting everything in its mouth, and it crawls underneath the sink and picks up a bottle of bleach, you don't go to the baby and say, yeah, go ahead and drink it if you think so. The former president of the United States thought it would be a good way to get rid of COVID. And you don't speak to the baby like that. Rather, you tell the baby, no, don't do that. And if the child says, why not? You don't explain about poisoning and death and this, and it's too complicated. You just say, because I said so. So in a similar way, new devotees in our movement were protected by bhakta leaders and temple presidents and different persons. And we're told a lot of times just to follow what we're instructed. But that also causes problems. In New York City, on one occasion, the GBC who was there, and he was also the temple president, introduced the standard of offering eggs to the deity. And some of the devotees were very disturbed by that, so they left the temple. Some other devotees said, well, anyway, he's a temple president in the GBC, whatever he says, we should just do, and they were quiet. When Srila Prabhupada came, he was furious. And he chastised the temple president, GBC, and he also chastised the devotees who left. Why did you leave? If you understood this was wrong, you should have done something. And he chastised the devotees who were quiet and who stayed and didn't do anything. He said, you shouldn't be blind followers. In the Bhagavad Gita, one purpose, Srila Prabhupada comments that blind following is also condemned. So we should consider what these things mean. I'd like to just offer a little thought in this regard. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada says very clearly, if possible, for installations, this Vedic study should be also introduced, if possible, for installations of the deities. Now, this is something when I first came to my Guru Maharaj, Govinda Maharaj, I'd already been in ISKCON for over 10 years, been initiated before. And my service prior to that, to coming to him for many years, was being like a Purohit and doing yagyas and deity installations and different ceremonies and things, mostly for Hindus and that. And so when I came to him, he engaged me in installing the deities of Radha Gopinath and Bhubaneswar. And so I've had some experience, although I don't do that service anymore. There's a lot more qualified people than me, so don't ask me to do that. But I have some experience in some, I know people who do these things, and it's very rare for the most part that devotees chant Purusa-sukta at the installation of the deities. In fact, to my knowledge, it was never done during the time of Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada said here, it should also be introduced. So from this, I would suggest that we can learn something that Prabhupada, what he did when he installed the deities of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra in San Francisco, there was no abhishek, there was no fire yagya, there was no mantras chanted, there was no prana pratishta, which is where you call the Lord to enter into the deity. They didn't even dress the deities, just they chanted Hare Krishna, and they lit a candle, and everybody waved the candle. It took turns, all these dirty, moochy, crazy, drug-intoxicated hippies were taking the candle and waving it in front of the deity, and that was the installation. And that's a fully bona fide installation, because the real installation of the deity takes place when Krishna's pure devotee comes before the deity. When we begin to worship, sometimes devotees, they say, I remember one temple I used to visit, and they told me in a different country, they used to say that we have Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra here, but it's okay. We don't have to have such a strict standard because they're not really installed. But I had a problem with that because they had Mangal Artik every day. They offered Bhoga every day. They did Artiks every day. They would worship them during the Sunday feast program. And those deities had something like, 15 or 20 Rath Yatra festivals in that particular country they would take them to. So if you say the deity's not installed, then what are you doing? Is it just idol worship? No, the deity is installed. How is a deity installed? Well, if you're going to offer incense to a deity, you go and purchase a deity in Lloyd Bazaar. And then you offer incense to the deity. Why are you offering incense? Well, simple answer, you're offering incense because you consider that the Lord is there. If you didn't think he was there, why would you offer the incense? Right? Now, you may be making a formal contract with him. I'm going to worship you every day and offer you 16 upachars or 32 or 5 or whatever. That's another matter. But when you offer that thing, unless you're doing idol worship, you're offering it because you consider the Lord is there. So this installation Srila Prabhupada performed was a bona fide installation. But here we see Srila Prabhupada expressing his desire that something would happen a little differently later on. So let's go on with our study about Purusa-sukta. What is a Purusa-sukta for? Who is it for? How do we understand it as devotees? One thing is for deity worship, as we're hearing, but who is it really for? In Madras in 1972, there was a conversation with Srila Prabhupada and Malvati and her husband Shamsundar. Prabhupada's very early devotees. And Malati was asking Prabhupada, what class of impersonalists are worshiping the Purusa-sukta? And Prabhupada asked that they're worshiping the universal form. And then Prabhupada replied, the universal form is not impersonal. That's personal. It's also a manifestation of Krishna. Malati became a little confused. She said, but in one of your purports, you're saying that the impersonalists, they're worshiping the universal form. And Prabhupada says they are advised. They're advised to worship the universal form. So the Purusa-sukta is not really, in one sense, for devotees. I don't know. We have a lot of devotees here in this discussion today. How many of you have pictures in your home of the Purusa-sukta? How many of you have pictures of the universal form, and that's like a big thing you want to worship? I ask the same question sometimes when we do fire yogas. I ask the devotees, how many of you have a picture of deities in your house? Everybody raises their hand. And then I ask them, how many of you have a picture of the sacred fire? Nobody. and I ask, why not? And why don't we hear more about the sacred fire? Why don't we hear more about Purusa-sukta and the universal form in the writings of our 6 Goswamis, in the commentaries in the Bhagavatam? Because the devotees of the Lord, they're not so inspired by that form. A famous example is Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who went to the Gandaki River, and while he was there, taking bath in the river, some shalagrams just leaped out of the river into his hands. He said, wait a minute, I'm just a renunciate. I can't do this. I can't worship. So you guys got to stay here. He put them back. And again, they came out of the river to him. This happened a few times. And he said, okay, I'll accept. And so he took those shilas back to Vrindavan. And on the day of Nrsimha Chaturdasi, on the day before Nrsimha Chaturdasi, he was worshiping the Lord. And he was lamenting to himself that all the devotees, Rupa Goswami, excuse me, Rupa Goswami discovered the deity of Govinda Dev and was worshiping him. Jiva Goswami has Radha Damodar. Sanatana Goswami has Madan Mohan. These are my brothers, my devotee friends. And they're all in ecstasy, being able to dress and ornament the deity. And I've got, with all respect to Shalagam Shilas, I've got these rocks. And there's no way to put a crown on them. I can't put a dress on them or anything. And he had this desire like that. So that night, Gopal Bhatta Goswami took rest, and he put the shilas, that was his habit, in a basket and hung it in a tree, different tree every night. So if some animals came or something, the shilas would be protected. When he rose the next morning and looked in the basket, he found an astonishing thing. And this is the day of Nrsimha Chaturdasi, when Lord Nrsimhadev appeared from the pillar for Prahlad Maharaj. He found in that basket the form of Radharaman. With that Krishna, understanding the desire of his devotee, manifested a form playing on a flute with two lotus hands and lotus feet and beautiful eyes and face and things for Radharaman. So the devotees, they want to worship a form of the Lord. And with a sacred fire or with the universal form, you can't dress it. And you can't really put ornaments on the universal form. You can't really, it's like, what do you do with it? Huh? In fact, if we consider the matter carefully, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says in one place that worship implies a desire for something. We read in the Lita Madhav of Rupa Goswami that when Radharani was worshiping the deity of Krishna, who was there in Nava Vrindavan garden in Dwarka, she was praying to the deity. She had some, please bless me, please give me this benediction. What was the desire she wanted? She was praying, my dear deity, please become a living, moving person. Please become Krishna. I want to be with Krishna. But she had some desire. When someone approaches the Lord, they approach with some motivation. And accordingly, Krishna manifests different forms which are there to satisfy the different desires of devotees. And the fire yagya, that we worship the Lord in the form of the fire, that's the Lord's form, is Vishnu, who's come to accept some sacrifice, to be a witness, to give some blessing. And similarly, the Purusa-sukta, or the universal form of the Lord, is there to give us a conception. Srila Prabhupada said in the conversation with Malati and Shyam Sundar, it's recommended for the impersonalists to meditate on the Purusa-sukta, on the impersonal form of the Lord, the universal form of the Lord, because the universal form is a personal form. It's something. Although Srila Prabhupada also notes in one purport in the second canto that it's an imaginary form. In other words, it's not a permanent form. And we also hear from our acharyas that Arjuna was thinking to himself or Krishna was saying that this, he tells Arjuna, this form, this universal form has never been seen by anyone before. Is that true? What about Mother Yashoda? We hear in the Bhagavatam that she saw the universal form. What about Duryodhana? In the Mahabharata, we hear that, again, that Krishna manifested the universal form for him. Our acharyas explain the universal form is always different.
Mhm.
And it's an imaginary form for the devotees to help them to understand that there's a God, that there's someone bigger than all of us, and that I should bow down to him, I should appreciate him. So this verse today, we're hearing Tagatram Vastusaranam Subhagasya Chabhajanam Tvagasya Sparshavayus Chasarva Medasya Chaivahi. It's speaking about how the body of the Lord is a generating center for all kinds of sense of touch, and it's a place for performing all kinds of sacrifice. Now, I'd like to shift a little bit at this time. And let's go back actually to the verse we were reciting from Purusa-sukta. Tasmad yagyat sarvahutaha vichesamani yagyare chandam sigagane tasmad jusatasmad ajayata. How from that universal form, the Purusa-sukta describes, came all the different sacrifices, came all the different mantras, along with the meters by which you chant the mantras. So this is a very beautiful thing. This is Krishna's nature. Krishna is the mother. Krishna is the father. Krishna is knowledge. Krishna is the object of knowledge. Krishna is the ability to understand knowledge. Let's look in the Bhagavad Gita. Here's a nice verse. This is chapter 9, text 17. Pitaham asya jagato mata data pitamahan vedyam pavitram omkara riksama yaja eva cha. A similar verse actually to this verse we were just reciting from Purusa-sukta, where Krishna is telling Arjuna that Pitamaham, I'm the father of this universe, Jagata Mata, I'm the mother of the universe, I'm the Data, I'm the support of the universe, I'm Pitamaha. Pitamaha is a word for Lord Brahma, means the grandfather. I'm the original grandfather of the universe. Vedyam, I am that thing which is to be known. I'm the object of knowledge, Prabhupada says. Pavitram, I am the thing which purifies everyone. Omkar, I am the syllable Om. Rik, he says, Rik Sama Yaja Evacha, I am the Rig, the Sama, and the Yaja Vedas. Prabhupada comments, the entire cosmic manifestation, moving and non-moving, are manifested by different activities of Krishna's energy. In the material existence, we create different relationships with different living entities who are nothing but Krishna's marginal energy. Under the creation of Prakriti, some of them appear as our father, mother, grandfather, creator, etc., but actually, they're parts and parcels of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada comments in other places, as do our acharyas, that it's due to the super soul's presence in the heart of all living entities that we can have some attraction for them, that we can feel some love for them. So here Prabhupada is saying, under the creation of Prakriti, some of the living entities who are nothing but Krishna's marginal energy. Some of them appear as our father, mother, grandfather, creator, etc. But actually, they're all parts and parcels of Krishna. So we want to see like that, not in the sense that the impersonalists see, who think that Sarvam Kal Vidam Brahma, they think that's the Mahavakya of the Vedic literatures, that everything is Brahman. But rather, we consider that Krishna is Param Brahma, and that we're Mamayvam So Jiva Loke, we're tiny fragmental parts, but we're all parts and parcels of Krishna. As such, Prabhupada goes on, these living entities who appear to be our father, mother, etc., are nothing but Krishna. In this verse, the word bhakta means creator. Not only are our father and mother parts and parcels of Krishna, but the creator, grandmother, and grandfather, etc., are also Krishna. Actually, any living being part and parcel of Krishna is Krishna. All the Vedas, therefore, aim only toward Krishna. The subject matter which helps us purify our constitutional position is especially Krishna. Similarly, the living entity who is inquisitive to understand all Vedic principles is also part and parcel of Krishna, and as such is also Krishna. In all the Vedic mantras, the word Om, called pranava, is a transcendental sound vibration and is also Krishna. And because in all the hymns of the four Vedas, Sama, Yaja, Rig, and Atharva, the pranava or Omkar is very prominent. It is understood to be Krishna. So this is one of the lessons that we're getting from Purusa-sukta and from this section of the Bhagavatam. We're reading this verse. Let's look at the verse again from today. I'll just read the translation. Speaking about the universal form, his bodily surface is a breeding ground for the active principles of everything and for all kinds of auspicious opportunities. At the same time, his skin is a generating center for all kinds of sense of touch and is a place for performing all kinds of sacrifice. So in that sense, in the language of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, from an article that we'll turn to in a few minutes, he says that he indicates that the Lord is both the legs as well as the ground on which we are to walk at all. Krishna is the object of sacrifice, but at the same time, Krishna becomes a sacrifice. He manifests both things. Otherwise, what would be the hope? Therefore, Krishna, Pitamaham Asha Jagato Mata Data Pitamaha. He's our father, our mother, our support, the grandfather. He's everything. And devotees should understand that. But how the neophyte devotees, or how the persons who at one time at least were impersonalists and who are Vedavadis, the followers of the Vedic literatures, how they see the Purusa-sukta, how they see this section of the Bhagavatam, and how we see it are very different. Let's look at a recent book from Srila Prabhupada. This is something that they called Quest for Enlightenment. It's from chapter 8 of the book. And I'm going to read you a little something. This is actually from a lecture of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada's giving some directions in a letter to devotee how to worship. He said, the second picture on your altar should be one of the Panchatattva, Lord Chaitanya, and his four leading associates. And then he explains, Lord Chaitanya is the incarnation of God for this age. He is Krishna himself, descended in the form of his own devotee to teach us how to surrender to him, specifically by chanting his holy names and performing other activities of bhakti yoga. Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful incarnation, for he makes it easy for anyone to attain love of God through the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So this is the amazing position of Krishna. Now, for the impersonalists or the Vedavada ratas, the persons who are attached to the flowery language of the Vedas, or for the Smarta Brahmins, they consider the Purusa-sukta in the universal form of the Lord in a very different way than the devotees do. We see when it's speaking that the Lord gives He is the object of sacrifice, and he becomes a sacrifice. We think of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is Priti Vishroy. Priti Vishroy is a technical term given by our Goswamis, meaning the object of love. But not only is he Priti Vishroy, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's become Priti Ashroy. Priti Ashroy means the abode of love. Krishna is famous as Priti Vishroy. He's the object of love. Radharani, as a supreme devotee, is Priti Ashroy, the supreme abode of love. The object of love cannot understand the experience of the abode of love, no more than the sunshine can understand darkness, or fire can understand cold. They're opposites, and they can't understand. So the Priti Vishroy cannot understand what the experience of the Priti Ashroy is, the abode of love. But he develops a greed. And Kaviraj Goswami describes Shiradaya Pranaya Mahima Kiddisovanaya Visvayogi Nabuta Madhuri Makidisova Madhya Sokyam Chashamana the Baba the Kiddi Sambiti Loba the Baba Jasamajani Sachigarva Sindhu. There were 4 desires that Krishna had in Dwarpa Yuga which were not fulfilled as Krishna avatar. When Krishna himself came, Swayam Rup Govinda, the original form of the Lord, there were still 4 things which were not, he didn't understand, he couldn't taste. He wanted to know what is Radhaya Pranaya Mahima, what is the nature of Radharani's love for me, Pranaya Mahima, what is Yinabhuta Madhurima, what is the sweetness that she sees in me. And Rasad, what is it that she tastes by worshiping me? Krishna himself couldn't understand these things. So to understand them, he came, the Priti Vishroy, the object of love, the object of sacrifice, became the devotee and thereby became the sacrifice at the same time. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, but he's also the greatest devotee. And he's come to teach us the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, which is non-different from Krishna and from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's a combination of all these things at once. And this is what many Gaudiya Vaishnavas see in the Purusa-sukta. This is what our acharyas have given. And we'll read something from Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in a little bit. This is a verse just now from Adilila chapter 4 that my Guru Maharaj used to often quote, speaking about the mission of Mahaprabhu. Se dwari achandali kirtana sanchari nama prema mala ganti paraila sansari. It's an amazing thing. When we talk about the sacrifice, this verse today is speaking about how the Lord is both the object of sacrifice and sacrifice himself. So now we're hearing something in Chaitanya Charitamrita from Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami about the nature of the kirtan of Mahaprabhu. Say dwari achandali. He gave, dwari means a gateway. He gave this gateway, a gateway to enter into this kirtan, even amongst the chandalas, the untouchable persons. Kirtan sanchari. He infused, he gave them this holy name, but it wasn't just the holy name. In previous yugas, the name was given. Actually, if you study later in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, there's some description given in one verse how even in such a yuga, there are some rishis who chant the holy name. But the problem, our acharyas have commented, is that they're more attracted by yagya and things like that. They don't really have so much faith in the holy name, so they don't stress it. And we don't hear about that in that age. In his Krishna Samhita, Bhaktivinoda Thakur similarly describes different holy names, different mantras of the name, which are given in Satya Yuga, Dwarpa Yuga, and Treta Yuga, and how in this Kali Yuga, it's the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So, but in this age now, it's not an ordinary name. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has taken the holy name and Prema Mala Ghanti Padale Samsare. He's taken a thread, just like when you make a garland, you take a thread and a needle and you put it through the flowers. So the flowers are the holy name, but what is the thread that's holding it all together? That thread is Krishna Prema, which holds together. And this is, all of a sudden, it's become a new thing. So he's come giving his own name. He's coming and chanting his own name. He is the object of this sacrifice, the object of this kirtan, but he's also the giver of this kirtan, and he's the taster of this kirtan. And in the mood of Srimati Radharani, he's giving ecstatic love through this kirtan, which had not been given in previous ages. There was kirtan, which Jiva Goswami describes as chanting, but Sankirtan. Jiva Goswami in Bhakti Sandarbha says it means samyak kirtan. Samyak means complete. It's complete because it's with Krishna Prema. And therefore the prefix Premanam comes before the word Sankirtan when we speak about what Mahaprabhu came to give. It's Premanam Sankirtan because it's a combination of both Radha and Krishna. And this is the ultimate expression of Purusa-sukta. Purusa-sukta means that the Lord becomes a sacrifice. He becomes the mantras. He becomes the meters by which we chant the mantras. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. He's come in a combined form of Radha and Krishna. And he's giving love for himself through his own name, which Parliya Samsari, he's garlanding, he's putting on the entire material world. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami goes on to explain in the next verse how the Lord both assumed the sentiment of a devotee and preached bhakti at the same time. Let's look at this verse. E mata bhakta bhava kori angikare. That Mahaprabhu, it's amazing. This is a real purport of Purusa-sukta. He's a sacrifice, and he's the object of the sacrifice. He came and he accepted the mood of a devotee, and apani achari bhakti kori de prachar. He preached devotional service, he preached about bhakti, and he practiced it himself. So this is the ultimate expression of Purusa-sukta. Again, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a beautiful verse. This is in the Anchalila chapter 18, where Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami speaks about the nature of this Krishna Prema that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to give. Let's look at this. He says, Krishna re nachaya prema bhakta re nachai apani nachai tine nachi ekatani. Nachai means to dance. Krishna re, this prema, Krishna re nachai prema, ecstatic Krishna prema makes Krishna dance. Bhakta re nachai, it makes the devotees dance. And then apani nachai, Krishna prema also dances. Tine nachi ekatani. And this way, all three of them dance together in one place. Our vision of Purusa-sukta is not something impersonal and we just meditate that the mountains are Krishna and the taste of water is Krishna. We also do that. Prabhupada once, he said that if a drunkard simply thinks that the taste of wine is Krishna when he drinks, then that drunkard will make some advancement. So we're not against that. But as Srila Prabhupada told Malati and Shyam Sundar, this is advised for the impersonalists. It's advised for them to give them some understanding of how the Lord can manifest in form. This is God. And therefore we see amongst many tribal people in different places in the world, they commonly worship the sun as God. Or they worship the ocean, they worship great things, powerful things as God. Therefore, Krishna says in the Gita, Nitya Saiva Haras Chaham, that I'm also God for the atheists. The atheists, they come and say, I don't believe in God. Okay, what is God? Well, God is that all-powerful person you can't resist. Well, you're going to get to meet him in the form of death. Nitya Sarva Harasham. We don't really care whether you believe in him or not. That's your choice. But you should understand that that there is something greater than you, and that's the form of the Lord. Now let's look at another way that the Lord manifests, and another way we can see this Purusa-sukta in the movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is from Bhakti Vikas Maharaj's book, Bhakti Siddhanta by Bhav, where he speaks about the kirtan culture at the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he said that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta revealed that there was a misunderstanding because they were underemphasizing the importance of hearing Krishna Katha. And he said that Hari Katha is the Swarup Shakti of Harinam. And just as Krishna is properly worshipped, not alone, but with his Swarup Shakti Radha, so also recitation of Harinam is incomplete and improper unless accompanied by hearing Hari Katha. So this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. Abhanat Phenomenamino, Krishna has manifested in the form of his holy name. And Srimati Radharani, Bhakti Bhagavatam Grayam, Nabudya Nachatika, she's manifested in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prema Moyi Bhagavat, Krishna Rashri Anga. It's part of the body of Krishna, but it's the heart of Krishna. And the heart of Krishna is Radha. And so you can't separate these two things. Just as the Purusa-sukta teaches us that the Lord is both the object of sacrifice and he is the sacrifice. And then he comes, he's the mantras, and he's a meter for those things also. So we can see the perfect ultimate expression of this in the movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a beautiful description again in Adi Lila chapter 4. I think it's probably my Guru Maharaj's favorite chapter, Chaitanya Charitamrita. That chapter is kind of a very important foundational chapter for Chaitanya Charitamrita and for the whole conception of Mahaprabhu. Text number 192 describes about the beauty of Krishna and how the beauty of Krishna is predicated, you know the word predicated, it's based upon the love of the gopis. You can't separate the two from each other. Gopi Shobha Deki Krishna to Shobha Bhara Jata. That when the gopis, when they see Krishna, they see that Shobha Bhara Jata, the great beauty of Krishna and body, it increases more and more and more. Their love increases. And then what happens? Krishna Shobha Deki Gopira Shobha Bhara Tati. When Krishna sees the love the gopis have, his beauty increases, and then the love of the gopis increases more. And later on in Madhya Lila, chapter 21, Kaviraj Goswami says, Gopi Baba Dharapana. Dharapana means a mirror. That the love of the gopis is like a mirror. My Guru Maharaj used to call it the Sadhvidvaya Darpana. When Krishna wants to see himself, when we want to see ourselves, and I want to think about what I would look like if I had a little bit of hair, then I go and I look in a mirror. So Krishna can't look in a mirror. He can look in a mirror, but the mirror cannot properly reflect the beauty of Krishna because that mirror is only one dimension. So when Krishna wants to see his own beauty, he has to go and take help from the Sadhvidvaya Darpana, or the mirror of the heart of his pure devotees. And this is spoken about here in this verse. Gopi Bhava Dharapana. The mood of the gopis, the love of the gopis is a kind of mirror. Nava Nava Kshana Kshana. And it's newer and newer every moment. Tada Agi Krishna Madhurja. Done Kori Huda Hudi. Bari Mukha Nahi Mudi. Nava Nava Donhara Prachura. Prabhupada translates, both the gopis and Krishna are complete. Okay, they're not incomplete. The gopis' ecstatic love is like a mirror that becomes newer and newer at every moment and reflects Krishna's bodily luster and sweetness in a newer and newer way. Thus, the competition increases. Since neither give up, their pastimes become newer and newer, and both sides constantly increase. So the ultimate expression of the Purusa-sukta, where the Lord manifests both the object of sacrifice and the sacrifice itself, as well as the means to accomplish that sacrifice, the ultimate expression of that Purusha-sukta, without a doubt, is found in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You won't find Purusasukta described very much in the writings of our acharyas. Again, I've done a little research on this. We used to recite this prayer every day for some time. It's given, this commentary is mentioned on this 5th and 6th chapters of the 2nd canto of Jiva Goswami and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. They mention Purusasukta. Jiva Goswami and Bhagavat Sandarbha. He explains how different verses correspond with different verses from Purusasukta. Actually, he's quoting from Sridhar Swami. That's given then. And then Baladev Vidyabhushan's commentary on Vedanta Sutra, naturally, he also cites Purusasukta in a few places. But other than that, our Goswamis haven't said very much about it, except in one very interesting place. In a book, which generally speaking, our acharyas kind of consider to be a little bit off limits for devotees. This is a book called Govinda Lilamrita by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, which is a wonderful collection of the pastimes of Radha and Krishna during the Asasavikara Vikara, the different pastimes of Asasavikara, the different 8 times of the day. But as my Guru Maharaj once commented to me, this book is quoted extensively in Chaitanya Charitamrita. We should know something about this book. So I'm just going to tell you a little summary of a pastime from the 15th chapter of the Govinda Lilamrita and how this relates to the Purusasukta. So Krishna performed the Rasa Leela, and the gopis, they danced for one night of Lord Brahma. Sahasra Yuga Paryanta Maharya Brahmano Guru, the 8th chapter of the Gita says 1,000 ages taken together, 1,000 days. That's one day of Lord Brahma. So the gopis were a little tired. Krishna took them into the water of the Radha Kund. And the gopis were playing there in the water. And Krishna was looking at all the gopis. And the gopis, they were a little fearful. And Krishna was pulling them down in the water. And Nandimukhi and Brindadevi and Danisha and different gopis, they were standing on the bank because there was a water fight that started between Krishna and the gopis. And Nandimukhi and Brindadevi and Danisha and others, they were standing, Radhe ki jai, Radharani ki jai. They were glorifying Srimati Radharani and shouting for her victory, her defeating Krishna. And at the same time, Madhavananda, who's one of Krishna's Priyanarma Sakhas, he has an intimate relationship along with Subal and Kundalata, Krishna's cousin. They were on another platform. They were showering flowers, desiring Krishna's victory. So then, Kaviraj Goswami says, began a great water battle between Krishna and the gopis. And Krishna was sprinkling them, splashing them heavily with drops of water, and that increased their enthusiasm. And they splashed him back. He began to splash them again. And the gopis were covering their eyes and nose and ears with their hands, bending their heads down. And then at that time, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, let's look at this verse. Richakareva sahasrane chitam tasam cha sundarya vilokane hari sahasra padatvam atantike gato sahasra bahutvam iho pabuyane. At that time, Krishna assumed 1,000 eyes to look at the beauty of the gopis. He assumed 1,000 feet to approach them and 1,000 arms to embrace them. He accepted 1,000 hands to sprinkle water on their faces. This is like Purusasukta, which describes in the beginning verse, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Sahasra Sirsa Purusha, that Purush has thousands of eyes and thousands of heads and thousands of hands. So when Krishna started doing this with the gopis, who were taking bath then, at that time, Madhavananda, who's, you could say maybe the original Brahman, Krishna Lila, he began to recite Purusa-sukta. Sahasrapat sahasrakshaha sahasrabahu ishvaraha ityushutyartamapatat krishnam vikshat mudabatu. Batu means Madhavananda. So seeing that Krishna had manifested all these thousands of eyes and thousands of hands, he began to recite the Purusa-sukta, how the Lord has thousands of feet and thousands of eyes and thousands of arms. And then Nandi Mukhi, his sister, was also another Brahmin, she started laughing, Sarvata Panipadam Tat. She started reciting Panipadam Tat. This is a verse from the Upanishads. Tat Sarvatok Shi Shiro Mukam Hasantiti Smitam Nandi Mukhi Tirashita Patat. She started laughing, and she was reciting that everywhere are his hands and his feet, everywhere are his eyes, heads, and mouths. So this is the same Purusa-sukta. The same Purusa-sukta, which is understood by different persons in different ways. This is a very confidential, very high thing that we don't generally meditate on, but we should have some understanding that our Gaudiya Vaishnavacharyas, what was their conception of the Purusa-sukta. The Purusa-sukta is not only for the impersonalists of the Vedavada, Smarta Brahmins, but it's also for the devotees. Now, I'd like to go a little further with you in our line of discussion about how the Lord in Purusa-sukta becomes the object of sacrifice, becomes a sacrifice, becomes the mantras to chant the sacrifice, becomes the meters by which we chant the sacrifice. This is from an article written by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Let's see who else is present here today. Lila Purushottam is present here. He's going to like this. He knows Lila Purushottam attends some of their classes. And this is from an article that Lila Purushottam likes very much, and he knows it's one of my favorites. It's called The Associates of Sri Chaitanya. And it's an article where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta explains the first verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita and how the Lord manifests in 6 forms, Panchatattva plus Guru. And he explains that if one wants to understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has to approach him through these 6 different features. Otherwise, it's not possible. And then he begins to speak about Guru. So let's hear what he says. This is a very high language. I'm going to break us apart and we'll explain it as we go along. The Guru is the embodiment of the manifestation of the divinity to the pure, receptive spiritual essence of the disciple. That's a real mouthful, isn't it? We tried to memorize that one. So what is a guru? Guru is the embodiment when the divinity manifests a body. That's Gurudev. Who does he manifest to? The pure, receptive. That receptive is important. Purity is important. The pure, receptive spiritual essence of the disciple. What is the spiritual essence of the disciple? In the language of my Guru Maharaj, he used to say, Atma Krandana, or the crying of the soul. That's the pure, receptive spiritual essence of the disciple. When we're hankering to know the Lord. So Gurudev, he's the embodiment of the manifestation of that divinity who manifests to the pure, receptive spiritual essence of the disciple. Okay, everybody can understand that? Let's go on to the next sentence. The Guru is the real and original recipient of the truth. Okay, he's the real recipient of the truth. He's the original recipient of the truth. The truth is manifest through him. He communicates, he communicates his knowledge to the disciple. That's the function of the Guru, right? The Guru, he's the original recipient of the truth. The function of the Guru is he communicates that knowledge to the disciple. But there's a problem. The disciple is too small a particle. Maivam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. Krishna says the jiva is a tiny, tiny particle. And that small particle, the jiva, is too small by himself to receive the whole truth. We can't understand it. Jiva Goswami begins his Bhakti Sandarbha by explaining the same subject matter. The jiva, the disciple, is enabled to receive Krishna or receive that truth through the power of the Guru. Okay, by the power of the guru, the disciple is able to receive it. The guru, as it were, takes the disciple by the hand and guides him on his every step on the plane of the absolute. So unless Gurudev takes us by the hand and guides us on every step,